Hey everyone, welcome back to Berlin Noir. Today we're going to be continuing off for where we have been in the last few episodes, and we'll be building today some military barracks. So these barracks here that we're going to be working on are the one up there, kind of in the top right area, the one that has a large field in the center, a little bigger than the size of a soccer field about. But there's actually two right next to each other, so that little empty green patch of grass there off to the left a second ago, those are also some barracks, and I initially planned on building both since I figured it would be pretty straightforward, not too difficult or time consuming, but actually this entire episode is just me building this one little area, this one group of barracks here. So a lot of details did go into it, and I really totally love how this turned out. Since it's a very unique build, it definitely stands out a lot in the area, considering, you know, from a distance you can definitely tell that it's something different, not just your typical kind of repetitive blocks that are, of course, all around the city. So I've noticed this area for some time, and for the longest time I had really no idea what it was. I kind of assumed for a while that it was a hospital, because there's the hospitals, I guess, built, or, you know, before this time period, but around here, well, just the ones that are all around Berlin. They look similar, I guess, to this, just kind of large buildings like this, you know, kind of narrow, where you'd imagine, of course, hospital beds and rooms, which, you know, in a sense, it's very similar to what you'd have in barracks, because, of course, it's also barracks are just a bunch of rooms for all the soldiers to live. So, yeah, I didn't really realize for the longest time that these are actually barracks, but I've had a map that I found, and actually, or I should say refound, because someone sent it to me a long time ago. I kind of lost it, and then I rediscovered it, and actually said military or barracks. So I was like, okay, cool. Now that I know what it is, I can try and look it up, find out, you know, maybe some pictures or anything. But I actually couldn't find absolutely anything on these barracks here or the ones right next to it. So, you know, if you by any chance know what these are called, or were called, I should say, since they aren't there anymore, let me know for sure. I'd just for some pictures, just to help, you know, me build more barracks in the future, since there are a few around here for sure. And yeah, I like to get them a little more accurate. And since I based this design, because obviously in the aerial view you can see the general shape, kind of just these four main buildings surrounding an open area in the center. I'm not sure if it was stone pavement or if it was grass. I decided to just go with a large grass center. You know, of course, that would be for, you know, military formations and that type of stuff, drills, whatever it may be. But yeah, the other barracks located right next to these, basically right across the street, there is one tiny segment of building still left from what existed back then. Because aside from that, nothing of these barracks is still around. So I looked at that, and it was just kind of old brick buildings, very similar to this, just kind of 2 or 3 stories tall. So I decided to use these industrial buildings. I used another location, actually a few locations, I should say. But they are kind of generic enough that they definitely fit as military barracks, I would say, at least styled after these that were in Berlin at the time. But yeah, I really do like how it turned out. I do kind of wish I had a different asset for the kind of the larger end pieces, not towers exactly, but the ones that have the white bricks as well. Because I would have preferred it all just to be the same kind of brick color. But with this building right here, and also the little kind of tower there, it does have that white brick color or plaster. I'm not sure if it's brick or plaster actually. But yeah, that's really the only thing good. But other than that, I think it still looks pretty good. And even though it is a different texture and brick color, it still matches and looks as though it, you know, it reasonably blends together. So I do like that. But yeah, so one thing, you know, when, you know, building this, I was trying to, like I said, you know, do some basic research, trying to find out some information about these barracks, but also just in general, the purpose and how these functioned during this time period. Because of course we're all very familiar with the Treaty of Versailles and its limitations on the military and the Reichswehr, the size it could be. So, 100,000, which was a limitation, that, by today's standards, that's pretty large. I mean, of course, even for modern Germany, that's a lot of people, a very large standing army. But of course, by back then standards, still with a whole lot of nationalism all across Europe, that's a very small size. So I also tried just to kind of look up exactly if these still kind of functioned as normal barracks or if some of them were closed down or inoperable since the military was scaled down. So perhaps that's why I couldn't find any information on this one, since again, I have no idea. So you'd have to correct me if I'm wrong, or just give me more information in general if you are familiar with any of this. But just kind of, I want to know what's going on in these barracks at the time, where they just had fewer people stationed, or were some of them reduced, or I should say, were some of them closed down, so the few that were still open, had, I guess, more closer to full capacity. Anything like that, just useful information, again, just to know, but also every little piece of information and details help when building this type of stuff. And just because, it's always kind of annoying when I know something exists, I know there's something there, and I just can't find for the life of me any sort of information on what I'm trying to build. It's a little annoying at times, but, of course it's going to be like that. You can't have plenty of resources and information on everything in a old city. But anyways, moving on, I guess. But so I guess up to this point, we've just been laying the main buildings around, which make up the barracks, and then I placed a few nice homes. I think they're called cube homes. I'm not really sure, but just like your general fancy European home, I guess. But I imagine those would be perhaps for the officers, or I don't know, anyone coming that's wants or needs a higher quality accommodations, I guess. But I did notice what looked to be like kind of that type of thing, some smaller homes. And I actually did see a couple of those still exist today, kind of when I'm on that aerial view and I'm comparing modern day with back then in the 1920s. It looks like those buildings are still there. So I imagine those were still part of the barracks. But again, they were just for people higher up in the ranks. So they had a little nicer accommodations and weren't cramped in with the rest of the soldiers. But yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, I did do a decent amount of detailing on this, since I couldn't really place any sort of military stuff, since there's really no assets that would fit in, but also just because, again, I'm not really sure exactly how these functioned back then, and I imagine there had just been nothing but a few soldiers stationed here, if any. As I mentioned already, I'm not sure if they were still functioning, this particular one, or if it was closed down or anything like that. But I did a lot of focusing on the kind of the entrances with small gates, and like these little side entrances here, of course, nothing too fancy or anything, just a little small gate, and scaling it down, because I've always realized that it's kind of a large, that tiny little gate there, it's kind of large. The kind of little gaps between the bars someone could easily fit through. So I figured I could scale it down a little bit more, make it a little more accurately sized, I suppose. But yeah, when I was building this, I was just trying to find things to fit in all these kind of open spaces. This entrance here is definitely my favorite. I made this the main entrance. I'm not sure if it was or anything, but it made sense since it went right towards the church, which was a garrison church. So of course it makes sense that would have a large entrance, at least towards that central plaza there with the church. But yeah, this is a park entrance, I think, or maybe a zoo entrance. I'm not sure. I don't believe it's vanilla. I believe this is a workshop asset, but it's a really nice asset for making something like this, right? Because you have that kind of fancy gate, and then the line on top with that little building there, where of course you'd probably have some guard station just to make sure, keep track of who's going in and out of the barracks. But yeah, I don't know. That definitely really helped bring the area together and kind of signify where that main entrance was. And I do go back and detail it a little more, of course, but at this point, I was still just trying to lay down the basics. And starting with the buildings, the paths, the walls, and then after that, get into detailing. Since I've talked about that before, sometimes I build in what I consider building in layers, where I like I said, just do a whole thing first. So I'll build all the buildings first, and then once I'm done with that, laying out all the buildings, then I'll do all the paths, then all the walls, and then lastly do all the detailing. Whereas sometimes I kind of just hop around in sections and groups where I build an entire area up, everything, detail it, and then I move on to the next area, build everything up, detail it, and move on to the next area, that type of thing. But typically with larger things like this, where there's a lot of kind of planned out buildings that are kind of geometric in shape, right? Making a kind of rectangular area in the center. I wanted to make sure I could fit in all the buildings, that it all looked right, nothing was too squished together or anything like that. So for larger areas like this, I definitely find it pretty useful to, like I said, kind of build in stages and not get to detailing too quickly. Because I definitely hate having to delete, undo, redo detailing when I kind of get done doing it and I kind of take a step back and look at it and see things don't look quite right, or maybe I forgot to include some sort of building that I kind of just need to, and that type of stuff. So yeah, it's never fun to have to delete all your hard work, especially when it comes to detailing. So in this case, I definitely wanted to save that for later. But at this point, I more or less had all the buildings down. I had started doing some basic detailing. But yeah, this is where I was kind of unsure of what I wanted to include in a lot of these open areas. Because in the center area where there's that large green grass patch, I just left that pretty much completely blank, or completely empty, I should say, since I pretty much figured that would only be used for just basic military formations, getting the soldiers out for whatever purpose, and otherwise would be probably empty. But these kind of corners, I decided just to have be stored with sheds. So, whatever's in there, maybe it's stuff for the military, or maybe just stuff for maintaining the grounds, the barracks, whatever it is. I just decided to go with that. But the nicer area, so on this side with these kind of nice homes, I of course didn't want to have anything really like that, but more go for some nice vegetation, hedges, flowers, trees, stuff like that. I added a nice little statue here in the front, just to really kind of bring this area together and have a really nice entrance. Also, make for some really nice screenshots and some cinematic shots with the church there and that kind of center roundabout type thing with the road going around. It all looks really nice. You'll see for sure in the cinematics at the end. I got a couple more shots than normal just because like I said, I really like how this turned out, especially including the areas around. With that church there, you have the canal running nearby, and some of the gasometers only a couple blocks away. So yeah, it's really just such a unique area, which is kind of what I've been saying ever since I started building out this way. I've just been enjoying this particular area a lot just because there is so much variation, right? There's the industrial stuff, there's these military stuff, there's some hospitals in the area. There's really just, you're never going to run out of different things to build, unique things to build, compared to some of the other areas of the city, which I guess were considered nicer areas, because my understanding, at least historically, this part of the city, especially on your way down to Neukölln and around Hermannplatz, was not considered one of the nicer parts of the city. So yeah, I don't know. Like I mentioned a lot, I like building the uglier, not uglier, but the more unique, the dirtier perhaps areas, the areas with the industry, all that type of stuff. I just think it's more fun and just really brings life to the city because, of course, that's realistic. You need that type of stuff in the city, and it's not bad by any means. It's just what makes a good city to live and visit or whatever it is. But anyways, moving on from that, just continuing some like just this kind of dirtier, grungier, whatever this is, just piles of wood, trash, a little outhouse there. Just trying to fill in the space and stuff. I did decide right here, because I couldn't tell when looking at the aerial view, but it looked to be a very small kind of like little chapel, I think. So I decided that would be a good little addition here, especially to kind of fill in the space here since it's a little awkward shape there. And I didn't want to continue to add just the kind of dirty props with the trash and pile of just whatever, since I didn't want to use it all over the place, all over these barracks. So I just used this tiny wooden church, which is I love this asset. I've only used it once else, or I only use it one other time in the city, I think in a cemetery. But it's I don't know, it's just a nice little church, nice little chapel. I love the wooden roof and the walls going around. It's just very nice details, and I think it's by, I'm forgetting who it's by now, but they definitely used some higher quality textures for sure. So yeah, it's a nice little asset there. But just making it a little nicer area, adding some flowers. And I totally forgot about these stone path decals, but I recently remembered them since I've used them a long time ago, but for whatever reason I just kind of forgot about it and I haven't been using them. But yeah, it's nice compared to just using your typical pavement paths or just, kind of plain paths like that. That's a nice little, addition, kind of break up the monotony of just that plain pavement stone texture, which is used all around the city. So now that I remembered, I am subscribed to that. I think I'll be using that in a few more places just because it's definitely nice for detailing nicer areas. Having those stone paths, it definitely looks nice for sure. But so that's pretty much going to do it for this episode. Just to finish up, we're going to be adding some basic details in the center here. Some trees kind of surrounding the buildings. I initially tried putting trees in the center area where the large grass patch is, because I think when I was looking at the aerial view that it looked to be as though there were trees there, but I kind of tested that out, looked at it for a second, but decided not to put trees there. It just kind of didn't really look right. Looked a little weird. But yeah, other than that, that's going to do it for this episode. Hopefully you all enjoyed this one. I definitely enjoyed building it. I loved how it turned out. So definitely stay tuned to the cinematics coming here in a second, because there's definitely a lot of good shots, lots of good shots. But yeah, if you did enjoy this one, consider giving it a thumbs up. It'd be very much appreciated. And if you are new to the channel and you have made it this far in the video, then subscribe, because there's going to be a whole lot more coming just like this. And yeah, I will see you all next time in another video.